Springboks won a very one-sided fixture, 73-0. We predicted it was going to be a big scoreline. In fact, it almost got to that 96-13, the Loftus record from 1998, where Nick Mallett's team did that to Wales. With me again is Nick and Gavin Rich. Guys, we're not going to start with the game. We're going to start with the bigger talking point, which is something that happened in the 79th minute. Sort of a little bit of handbags, and then suddenly out of the blue, Eben Etzebeth stuck his finger in the eye of Alex Mann and got himself a permanent red card. The third one of the BOKS tour. This one, hardly an argument around, and I think we're all expecting a disciplinary to give him a very long ban because there's simply no excuse. Nick, your thoughts?
It was a real pity for the game to end on that note. We thoroughly dominated the game, and Yemen, I think there must have been something said. He was just pushing in the guy's head, and his hands flipped round, and the thumb went into his eye. It looks like, and I can tell you as an ex-coach. I had a player, Bergamasco from Italy, who was playing on the flank, and we had a driving maul going, and one of their guys was trying to get over the top of the driving maul, and he didn't even look at him. He just turned around with the back of his hand. He was trying to push the guy backwards, and his hand went across the face of the player, and his finger must have touched the eye, but there was no deliberate action. He wasn't even looking at the guy, and he got 13 games, because they take it so seriously. Anything anywhere near a person's eye is, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, I think it starts at 24 matches or something like that, and then you can work down from there, which is, I mean, that's a whole season almost. So I'm not sure what's going to happen because the video evidence was pretty clear. And, you can argue about low tackles and all that sort of thing and change of heights and mitigation. But in this one, there was a lot of anger on his face. And I can't see a disciplinary hearing, letting him off gently on this one.
Yeah. No, just to say, it depends. There's two ways they charge it. One is if it's contact in the eye area or if it's contact in the eyes. If it, obviously the second one, much more serious, starts at, I think it's 12 weeks and goes up to 24 weeks and beyond, up to 3 years. They can, depending on the severity of that.
Yeah.
I did a bit of Googling last night and it looked like there was one incident with Stephen Ferris got eye gouged. I can't remember the other player, but it was 70 weeks. So it can
Yeah.
be as bad as that. It could be a year quite easily. And I think, Gav, I suppose in the one way, I mean, this is the worst thing for Springbok fans, but for the Sharks, especially with them having what to lose this week as their next opponents, they'd want Yemen to be there.
No, they wouldn't want. They were never going to play him in Toulouse anyway. I think they're playing their second string team there, and the way they went against Connacht last night, I think what happened to Wales last night at the hands of the Springboks could actually look quite good compared to what might happen to the Sharks against Toulouse next week. But let's not go there. Look, I was in Wellington in 1994, and if you've got a good memory, you'll know where I'm going now. I was one of the few. I was the journalist, the only South African journalist who stayed behind in Wellington for the Johan Leroux hearing after he bit the ear of Sean Fitzpatrick. And I decided to Google myself today to remind me of what his sanction was. It was 19 months. And I remember the argument at that time being that I can't remember what the argument from the South African side was, but we were very amateurish in those days anyway. I mean, Jannie Engelbrecht was the manager there. They didn't bring in lawyers in those days. It was before professional rugby. But I remember at the time, everybody saying that there's people saying there must have been a reason why he bit Sean Fitzpatrick's ear. And I remember that the disciplinaries committee's answer was basically that you don't bite the ear. I mean, no matter what the other player's done. And I think in this particular case, we have bleated quite a lot about red cards in the last couple of weeks, but there can be no complaints about this one. And I do feel the worst for Eamon. I just don't. I can see it being a really long time that he's going to be out of the game. And yes, as you say, the Sharks. Now forget about Toulouse. I mean, they wouldn't have played him against Toulouse, but they would have wanted him to play against Saracens the following week when they play their first home game in the Champions Cup. It's just, you'll recall when we were talking when we did the preview on Thursday, I think it was. I said that the one thing you asked me, what do I want to get out of this game, and I said no injuries, no big player like ruled out of the URC. We want to have all the guys playing URC because I felt like it was a meaningless game. And frankly, after watching that game, I still think it was a meaningless game. To me, it almost looked like a practice game. I mean, the opposition was just so poor. But the worst thing that could have happened was something like that did happen. And I hear, from two different sources that I haven't actually spoken to Marco myself, but Marco Massotti was absolutely furious last night because Eben Etzebeth gets paid a lot of money and he doesn't play very much for the Sharks. And now there's a chance they won't see him again this season. I mean, there's a real possibility that that's how long he's going to be suspended for. So I can quite understand why the Sharks would be livid about that. And as I say, to me, it was a meaningless game. So it's just really such a pity that something like that did happen.
I think the one thing we all agree on is it's just, I mean, there was no reason to do that. I mean, Evan's not a guy who's playing his first game. No matter what the guy said, he's been in 140 odd tests. He's got all the experience in the world to do that. You don't expect that from a guy, obviously, as experienced as he is. The biggest thing for him, I suppose, he could, if it's long, he could miss the All Black tour next year. You never know how long it's going to be. They could punish him that way. That in terms of the internationals. And Nick, I just want to maybe chat to you, ask you this. I've received obviously a lot of messages sort of overnight from BOKS fans saying, but the Welsh player did something. Or there was some guy said there was apparently either a slap or palm in the face or something like that. That obviously whatever it was that got Evan upset, it doesn't really matter. It might be used. They might be able to use it, I suppose, as a bit of mitigation to maybe get a couple of weeks off. But it's not going to stop the original sin, so to speak, is the finger in the eye.
Yeah. No, I think unfortunately, if you play lock for an international side like South Africa, we've produced them all along. Your Frick de Vries right through to Bucky's Botha, to Eben Etzebeth. Hard guys who don't take a backward step. And it's very hard, people start saying, yeah, but, there was mitigating circumstance. He was abused or he said something about his family or, that he got a little slap. You really do know that if you do certain things like punch a guy in the face or kick him on the ground, and players know that if you put your hand in a bloke's face and your fingers go close to his eye, you are really risking a long ban. And so it just seemed to be so unnecessary that at the end of the game, I can understand him getting angry and wanting to threaten the player. I can understand that because you can't go from what is essentially a boxing ring into a sort of debating society. It doesn't work like that. Your anger overflows. But you have to take the consequences. And I'm wondering whether it wouldn't be in professional sport now, if you're found guilty of a crime or whatever you call it, of doing something on the field that gets you a long ban. I'm wondering if the owner of the Sharks can't look at taking money out of his contract, saying you're not playing 10 games. We can't pay you for the time you're playing. You should be playing for us in these 10 games. It's one thing getting injured because that's not your fault. But something like this, it would have quite an effect, I think, on player behavior if they were going to be hit in the pocket as well as by getting banned from the field. It's something perhaps that needs to be looked at in the professional era because you can't. I mean, it's something that is it's like the unfortunately Jan Hendrik Wessels one. Even though people couldn't actually see the evidence, I have a feeling that Jan Hendrik was guilty there, and if he was guilty, he personally has lost quite a bit of money from not going on the Springbok tour. I mean, I think it's in the region of R1.5 million. I think he's missed. So what are the ramifications if someone like Eben doesn't play for the next 6 months for the Sharks? I think they probably pay the majority of his contract.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. At least with an injury, there's injury insurance that kicks in that takes off that burden off the club. But in this case, yeah, there's no sort of respite for them. Let's turn to the game. It's not. Yeah, I think I don't know. I'm not sure what more we can say until we get a verdict. Then we can probably talk a bit more about it. But Gav, it was as one-sided as we all expected. You said it could be anywhere between what 30 and 90 points, and
35 and
at some point,
yeah.
it already felt like it was even going to get to that point. So,
yeah, look, I mean, to me, I got quite irritated because some poor guy, and because of the, I don't know why, just this whole game irritated me because I am quite concerned about the South African rugby ecosystem and that, and some guy sent me a message. This was a statement performance. The world's going to be quaking in their boots. And I sent a message, and he's also a guy who runs he's a guy based in New York who also connected to Malcolm Masotti, by the way. But and I sort of just gave him a volley back, and I said, "Listen, mate," I said there were statement performances this season in Wellington, in Dublin, and in Paris. I said this wasn't a statement performance. I said if there was a statement performance from a South African rugby team this weekend, it was actually the Stormers in Munster last night. I mean, that was an amazing performance. But we were always going to beat Wales. We were always going to beat them convincingly, in my view. And you don't make a statement. I mean, if you're the biggest boy in the school, you don't make your statement by beating up the smallest boy in the school. You make your statement by taking on somebody your own size. Not that I was ever in that kind of sort of environment when I was at school, but you know what I'm saying. So to me, it was actually not dissimilar to Nick's game in 1998. I mean, it wasn't a full-strength Wales team. Wales are in even lower ebb in World Rugby now than they were then. And if the game had been played at Loftus, then I think the Springboks would have run up 180 because that's how poor that team was. So look, the one thing that I said beforehand was that if you're playing a poor team, the one thing that you need to do is make sure that poor team doesn't show you up by scoring points against you. And the fact that the BOKS whitewashed them, to me, was one good point. I mean, that they didn't let them into the game, not even right at the end when we were down to 14 and when they had finally that little bit of momentum because of the red card and the penalties. So that was a good thing for me. But otherwise, I find it hard to talk about that game because it's just we bullied them. I mean, we did. We were just physically superior to them. We smashed them. And to me, at times, it almost looked like it was a training. I mean, I watched it in a place where everybody was like betting whether they were going to make 80, which they would have if it hadn't been for that red card, like a point a minute. And when you get a test match that's reduced to that kind of conversation, then there's a problem. Then it's not. So this game's always going to be remembered. You say let's move on from the Eben Etzebeth thing. This game's always going to be remembered for the Eben Etzebeth incident, just like that game I mentioned earlier in Wellington back in 1994 will always be remembered for Johan Leroux biting Sean Fitzpatrick's ear. It's just one of those unfortunate things about sport. I would sort of say, well, like later in the week, we come back and we talk about the Springbok season. And in that analysis, I'm probably not going to talk too much about the Cardiff game.
Well, I'll come in. I'm not quite as disparaging. Not disparaging. You're not being disparaging. You're being sort of offhand about the performance. I think a test team has to go out there and has to beat the opposition, and we did it exactly the right way. We were direct the entire game. We used our forwards to get momentum. They weren't able to tackle us back, so the ball was always on the front foot. The timing of the runs were better. We could have scored more points. Ironically, we scored a lot, but we could have scored more because we missed a couple more opportunities. But what I liked about it was the intensity of the BOKS, the fact that they stuck to their task, that they didn't allow Wales to get back in the game. When they did get into situations close to our line, we defended our line with the same ferocity as if we'd been defending against New Zealand. So there were some good things about it, a good way to finish the season. The fact that Wales weren't good enough you can often slip into a game that you win 50-35, like the All Blacks did against them, or whatever it was, 50-26. And that's not that you come off the field feeling a little bit disappointed with your performance, but there's no way that we could have been disappointed with that performance yesterday. I thought the guys really got stuck in. I thought Esterhuizen was just outstanding. His time in the forwards has just made him better in the contact areas. His go forward, his presentation of the ball, everything. He was good on defense. He even got a turnover close to our line, which was critical. No, it was a good performance. Sasha played well. So it was just, I think, consolidating everything we've done this year. It was what the best team in the world should do against a selection, a B team type selection from Wales. Although, quite frankly, if they'd had their A team, I think they might have got 50 points anyway, because I don't think they've got the strength in depth that we have. And the way we played and the manner with which we controlled that game was such that they don't have a front row that competes with our first or second string front row. And I think the last thing I said, I just hoped we were going to go in there and not play it like a barbarians game, that we would just go and do the job correctly, take them on in their weak areas. We carried on kicking contestables that we dominated. We tackled them back. They kept on going backwards from every attack they had. And they were just never in the game. And that's huge credit to the Springboks.
Nick, I would ask you, just from a coaching point of view, a game like this, from the outside, fans might not see the value in it, I suppose, and winning so easily, confidence is a huge part of that. But what else does it really do? I suppose combinations play together, another game together, and what else does it do for a team
not
like
really.
the BOKS?
No, it's almost like a banana skin game at the end. Our big efforts were against France and Ireland. And we came through those, really well. Showed immense character and resilience, and stuck to our game plan and to each other in terms of courage and just everything. We just were brilliant in those games. Two when we were down to 14 men, and even against Ireland, we played them at the area where they were at their weakest, and we kept on doing it. It's the right thing to do. And this game, when you get suddenly at the end of the season, I mean, credit's got to go to that coaching staff, because the enthusiasm with which the Springboks played surprised me. I mean, it's been a very long season for those guys. They've had alignment camps, and some of those alignment camps at the beginning of the season were the toughest they've ever had under Rusty and the fitness and conditioning guys. And Rusty knew it was a long season, and he'd set himself those goals of those first 4 games in preparation for the Rugby Championship, Italy and Georgia, and then the Rugby Championship. We had those 2 disappointing games, 3 even, because Cape Town wasn't the best, but obviously Joburg, and then to come on this tour, and that's another whole focus on a new tour, and the way in which he changed up the team, and the way in which the team played with the same consistency, whoever was in whichever position, was massive credit to this coaching staff. I mean, it was compared with Australia's tour, obviously was a disaster, but even New Zealand's tour wasn't great either. So, I mean, I think that they've got questions and we don't. We just have to make sure that our players can maintain that intensity going into the next year, and particularly in the New Zealand tour that's coming over here.
Gav, I'm not sure really what more to ask, because I mean, it doesn't help focus. Yeah, I mean, is there something you want to add?
No, I was just going to say just about the BOKS. Okay, firstly, I mean, I don't mean to be disparaging of the BOKS performance. The BOKS played yesterday what I expected of the BOKS. Nick's quite right; they are the best team in the world, and they played yesterday like the best team in the world. And Nick did say in our preview that they must build an innings, and that's what they did, and they were really good. But if I'm just looking back at the season and just looking at yesterday's dominance in the forwards, let's go back to what we said at the start of this tour. We thought that Jan-Hendrik Wessels' absence was going to be a huge thing in the scrums. And then in that first game, Ox got injured against Japan. And ahead of the French game, we were all very worried. And I remember I was saying, jokingly, I said, if Damien Willemse takes a mark, will they call for a scrum? And we all agreed, no, they wouldn't do that because they don't have Ox. They haven't had Ox for the last 4.5 games. But you wouldn't think so, because they have just been so dominant in the forward in the scrums. And if you look at that, and let's just go back to the Etzebeth thing very briefly. A lot of people think, if let's say he is suspended for a really long time, like how are the Boks going to do without Eben Etzebeth next year? I would actually avow that there's only one player, and you know that I'm a Marxist. There's only one player that's indispensable to the Boks at the moment. And that's Malcolm Marx. That's why I say I'm a Marxist. I think that there's every other player in that team can sort of look over their shoulder and know that they're replaceable. And I think that's one of the big things. Now we're actually almost going into a season analysis, but that's one of the big things that the Boks have done this year is that they've got, okay, obviously Sasha's now established himself as the number one flower half. And if you look at Sasha, I was watching Deval Brevis bat earlier on in the ODI, and I almost liken Deval Brevis, who is going to be a generational player, to Sasha in the sense that they both got this incredible talent. But Deval Brevis, when I watch him bat in an ODI game, it's almost like he doesn't know how to pace his innings. And for a long time, I think that might have been what they were working on with Sasha. But he's like starting now to get that sort of those game management skills. I still think he maybe has to still work on them, but those sort of things are what I enjoyed about watching yesterday. Is you see again. I mean, as I say, I mean, I'm just negative about the game because I just didn't like the fact that they took the Springboks away from the URC, and you know why. And we spoke about it on Thursday. It's just that some of the things we saw yesterday. It was, as Nick says, like confirmation of how much they've grown, and that you see somebody like Ethan Hooker as well. I mean, those guys and Kane, they're all very good international players now. Even the young guys that have been bled into the system. And when that team was selected, we didn't sort of say, "Oh, there's youngsters there." But we don't think of them as youngsters anymore, even though they are young. I mean, Ethan Hooker's young. Sasha Feinberg and Gomazulu is young. But they've grown as international players this year, and that to me is the big step forward this year. And it was, as Nick says, it was sort of confirmed yesterday. I just don't see. I mean, what I'm just saying is that it's not a statement performance because you don't make a statement against Wales. Yeah.
I was going to say, Nick, just one last thing about the game. I just want to ask is, and I'm just give you a chance to maybe gush about him a bit. Is that I was watching Zach Porton yesterday, Zachary Porton, and the ease with which he came in at loose head, being a tight head, and we spoke about it in the preview as well. And the way they still won scrum penalties. I mean, okay, fair enough. It was against Wales. They were totally dominant in all other facets, but just the fact that a youngster like that came into this tour, and we were also wondering, we know he's a guy for the future, but especially a tight head at that age, and he's actually had a wonderful tour if you think about it.
Yeah, he has, and again, full credit to Rusty for picking him very young and giving him the opportunities. He's kicking off against Japan, as we said, was a nice soft start, but he did really well there. I think the important thing to know is that he's made great improvements in his scrummaging technique through the Stormer systems here, and particularly with Brock Harris. So it's not as though he went to the Boks as a totally untested player. He'd already done really well in the URC. And I mean, I'm hoping they're going to keep him at tight end. I think that's a much more important position. You can get loose heads are easier to find than a really top quality tight head. So it'll be nice. This swinger thing, I'm sure it does work. You get a guy like Thomas Tutoy, he does it really well. But Zach's quite young and he's quite tall too. He's 6'3", I think, close to 1.92 on. And at loose head, that's quite tall. You need to, you don't want to get. You've got to be very, very heavy if you're at loose head and you're that tight. Like Ostu Runch, he was 140 kilos, and that's Zach's not going to get there. So I think given the opportunity to play at tight head, he came out loose head. The fact that we did well, I think, was much more to do with the fact that Wales were just haven't got decent props. So he was supported by a Springbok pack on his right hand side as well. I think keep him at tight head, and well, the BOKS can do what they like. It's up to them. But at 21 years old, if you can keep on going at tight head, he's going to serve the BOKS tremendously in that position in 4 or 5 years. Well, all the way, but particularly in the next cycle, World Cup cycle. He's only 21, I think. So he'll be 23 in 2027, and then 4 more years he'll be 27. He's probably got, I don't know, 2 or 3 World Cups in him, like Frans Malherbe. But I think tight end's his position.
Yeah, Brendan, just if I could actually comment on that as well, having watched the Stormers play last night and just having observed their scrum culture. And I don't know if you've watched the game yet, Nick, but
yeah, I have.
It was just such a powerful scrumming performance. And I watched Ollie Kebble, and last night was one night where he really reminded me of his father. It was just like I mean, that Stormers scrumming culture is just so impressive, and there's a real sort of like cue now at Loosehead. And the reason I'm talking about this is to support your point that I think Zach will probably play tight head mainly at the Stormers, because at the Loosehead at the Stormers they've got Vernon Matonga, who I rate really highly. Ntutuku Machunu has yet to play for them, and I know he's a beast. I mean, he was a player that John Plumtree was very, very sorry to lose from the Sharks. They've still got Ali Famak. He's aging a bit, but he's one of the strongest props around. And now they've also got Ollie Kebble. And so Zach Porthen is part of a scrumming culture at the Stormers where they will always tell you that they learn a lot because of their big Tuesday sessions where they go at each other. And Vernon Matonga told me about his first time he went and he scrummed at the Stormers. He was scrumming against Frans Malherbe, and he's just come out of Varsity Cup. And that's how you learn, and that's how props in particular learn, because I mean, front row is obviously the one area in the field where you have that real direct confrontation. So Zach Porthen at the moment is at the right union. I think there's going to be a bit of a queue at tight head next year when Wilco Lowe arrives, and if Frans Malherbe ever plays again. So, but at the moment, he's at the right place, and he can. It's going to be very interesting. I'm looking forward to this URC. Well, the remainder of the URC season. I watched just on talking about positive things because I was a bit negative about other things earlier. I watched the Bulls yesterday. Okay, the Bulls lost, but that Cheswell Yuster, the left wing, who's only 18 years old and who played in the under 20, the junior BOKS side that won the World Cup. He is going to be a really phenomenal player. We know Hashim Pete, the scrum half, is probably going to be a phenomenal player as well. So when we talk about going forward to the next World Cup, everybody will say, well, these are the guys that are. But in the next 2 years, somebody else could come through, like Frans Steyn did in 2007. Exactly. You don't always have the guy who played. You don't take the same squad from 1 year into the World Cup. It's sometimes the other guys who come through. And I think that South Africa is in a very strong position now, just from what's coming through. And that's what I'm looking forward to watching. And the reason I mentioned Yuster is because you mentioned Porthen, who wasn't part of quite as a winning culture at junior level, at national junior level, as the guys were this year, because I think he kept an aside that lost most of its games. But he's developed from what I've heard from Dobber and from what Nick's told us. So I'm really looking forward to the URC season now, just to see some of those guys coming through, because there are a lot of them. And if they've got experienced players around them and they're playing in a place like the Stormers where you've got a Frans Malherbe, okay, he's not going to be there, but you've got those other guys. It can only be a positive.
Yeah. I think we're going to leave it there. We'll be back later in the week just to wrap up the BOKS season, and maybe ask you guys. You can only take 33 or 34 players to the World Cup, and we've used 50 this year. So who would drop out? It'll be an interesting conversation, and just wrap up the season at the same time. And there's a World Cup draw coming up probably as well. We can talk about then. But for now, I think that's it, guys. Go have a good Sunday evening, and we'll chat again soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Brendan. Cheers, Gab.
Thanks, guys.